Hello and welcome to this episode of Ballman Tech. So in today's video, we're going to start part 2 of our what you need to know before buying your first older AMG. And so let's go ahead and jump right into it. First thing I want to talk about is picking a car, as you're looking around at the different models and ones you might be interested in, is looking at the drivetrain. So, because that's really your foundation for your ownership of the vehicle. Although looks are very nice, if you're just looking for your first vehicle, make sure that you get something that is, solid. And a lot of different engines and things have different problems. And for the most part, I stick with the M112 and M113 versions of the engines, just due to their simplicity. They do have some problems, crankshaft position sensor, and obviously leaking valve covers. Alternators is another big one, but relatively that's not that big a deal. With some of the like M113K, they have a supercharger, same as the M112K, and their complications can be a little bit higher due to like that one oil line that I mentioned in the last video and things like that are a little bit more specific to that actual model. So I mean, that's kind of where you look at the difference between what is an AMG and what's a Mercedes issue. If it's a specific oil line, if it's expensive brake rotors like on this car, $500 for the front rotors with pads, those things are AMG specific. But if it's a Mercedes issue, W211, where you have different aromatic costs, you have battery issues, a lot of electrical gremlins in these cars. This was like early 2000s when Mercedes was really starting on adding all the electronic components. And then like my 06 has I think 47 different modules in it that I scan with my scan tool. There's a lot of little things like that. So there's certain things that are just going to be your normal run-of-the-mill Mercedes prices. Things I buy some parts off Amazon or eBay depending on the quality and their use. And even buy a respectable brand. I certainly recommend like FCP Euro for buying parts for your Mercedes, due to their lifetime guarantee. So like when I bought rotors, I bought them through there, so that way my rotors ever go out, I can get replacements. So highly recommend it, especially for some of these more expensive components. But for the other stuff, if it's a headlight, for the most part, it's not going to be too crazy. A brake light's not going to be too expensive because they're already on the regular, normal bodied cars. Another example for a W210 chassis is like the shifters. The shifter plate, usually the cup holder sits right behind it. If it gets any liquid in it at all, as mine did, the sunroof leaked once, and it's about $150. And then I had to buy a scan tool in order to actually take the code out of the transmission to get it out of limp mode because it was a hard code. And which I'm going to talk more about that in the next video, the different scan tools I use for the different vehicles, what I recommend to buy depending on which vehicle you're getting, and then a little bit on basic setup and how to scan, because that could help you too if you get one prior to owning your first one. So as you're going to look at the cars and things like that, you can see. All right, as far as other things to look for, look at any chassis specific things like W210s, especially up north. Northern states, you're gonna have a lot of rust issues. There's certain things about each car, just the normal bodies. On my W211, I had to deal with an issue of a leaky trunk due to the third brake light seal being faulty. So there's a lot of things like that you'll want to look into. Now, even if you're buying an older car, for example, a C32 AMG, which has the inline 6, just like BMWs of the era, are prone to head gasket problems. So, making sure the coolant system is good. If I show up to a car and it never overheated, but it has a brand new water pump, radiator, hoses, and things like that, and that's like all that's new on the car, and it's not an owner that you could tell just takes a lot of pride in what they have, then that means it probably overheated and they were trying to fix the issue, and it's little things like that you pick up on. Like I said last time, you buy the seller, you don't buy the car. So, it's very important to really know what you're getting into, and don't just trust everything the seller's saying. That's where forums and Facebook and things like that can come in handy. If something feels off, it probably is, and either run away from that or adjust the price accordingly. Also, obviously with AMGs, due to the higher wear and drivetrain, you're going to go through a lot more tires. The brake pads you don't really go through more because they're so much larger. But there's a little bit more cost. As I said, these were $500 for the rotors and pads. I think my W211 is like $300 for some Zimmerman front pads and rotors. So it really just kind of depends on which model. And then you have other components like, a window switch is not going to be any different. So additionally, it's also important to look and see if you want a facelift or pre-facelift car, you have different components. For example, this one had a different shifter in this W210 because they updated it so that you could kind of like do the slap shifter. This was prior to them adding the little, shifter paddles behind the steering wheel in the later models. And they changed the screen, they changed, they updated the car. I've got the command, the larger command unit, things like that. So those are things you're gonna wanna look into, figuring out which model you want. And I typically always recommend trying to buy the latest year of a car. Now I did that with, this car and my 06, but then my 2002 C32 was the first model year of that particular car. So probably not the smartest. And so there's things like that, usually in the later cars, you're going to get more refinements. More of the service bulletins have come out and they've fixed issues, recalls, and things like that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, trying to find your first AMG. So Auto Tempest obviously is a pretty great resource. They hit up a lot of the dealers, and there's even a way to search a lot of Craigslist. And it's good for like a kind of a general overview, especially if you want just hey, what's the normal prices there are? But when it comes to the cheapest deals, I have never found them on Auto Tempest. I usually, like even on Craigslist, they don't have quite as many Boolean logic filters when you actually go to search something. So they're not gonna search, some people title their vehicles as Benzes, others just Mercedes, sometimes both. E55 in a space in between the E and the 55. There's little things like that you're gonna wanna search for on your own in whatever search radius that you have. And that's kind of where I've run into some issues, is that it won't display everything. So also, as far as dealers, cars and bids, bring a trailer, that's where you're gonna get your clean and nice examples, even, in forums. I've never seen a real good deal on a forum. It's usually people wanting the absolute top dollar, and they want all the money they put into it. They want most of that money back, which is, I can understand that. I'm not hating on it. I'm just saying if you're trying to find a deal, that's probably not where I would go. It depends, if you're trying to spend, you're trying to get a 50,000 mile or 60,000 mile car, then yeah, you're going to have to spend for it. There's just no way about it. I think you'd be hard pressed to find an actual good deal there. You're going to find deals in north of 120,000 mile vehicle. I also, of course, use OfferUp. That's how I bought my C32. I bought this car through Facebook. I went to the dealer for my 06 E55. And, so a little bit of varied experience there, and I bought plenty of cars through, usually Craigslist is where I find a lot. Facebook is an absolute pain. I hate it. I can't stand it. Their algorithm to me is trash. You try to search for like AMG and they just show you everything but, or it's an E350 with AMG wheels. Like, no, I searched in E55 AMG and they're like, oh, you must be interested in a G-Wagon. Well, to be fair, I am interested in a G-Wagon, but you know what I mean? Like, or a C300, for example. Like, that's the kind of things they show me. They don't actually show me AMG cars. So your AMG car usually is a letter or two letters followed by just two numbers. So if it says E500, that would be a non-AMG. If it's E55, then that is an AMG because it's only got two letters. So most cars that you see out, that's what it's going to be, as long as somebody actually has all their numbers on the on their trunk and one of them hasn't fallen off over the years, because that happens too. Also, look at the pictures. Look for telltale bumpers and quad exhaust and even badging to see, at least on the first impression, if it's an AMG. So let's talk a little bit more about how to tell if the AMG is real or not. And this is more applicable for me in my experience, because I own early 2000s AMGs, and those are the ones I'm going to speak to. And you could look up on each model over the years, look up the differences between AMG and non-AMG versions, so as well as facelift and or pre-facelift and then later facelift cars. So when it comes to the W210, you're looking for bumpers, obviously the title, looking at the VIN, looking at the engine cover, the steering wheel, the perforated leather seating. What's some other things? Oh, the dash says AMG. Obviously, the trunk says it. The floor mats, if it still has them and you're that lucky to get them, then that's another resource that you'd want to look for. The floor mats are several $100s because they stopped making them, so everybody sells them used, and I've had to spend several hundred for a few sets to actually get the E55, and they don't just say Mercedes or AMG on them. So those are the types of things that are going to cost you later on if you ever want them. So if you can find a car with them, highly recommended. That's kind of the most about the W210. When it's C32, the shifter says it, the dash, once again, front bumpers is shaped differently. AMGs usually have mesh instead of like just regular louvers. Trunk badging, the side badging on that car where it says V6 compressor, which compressor in Mercedes vehicles is, that means supercharger and not supercharged, because that would be like mit compressor or aufgeladen, which would be supercharged. So it doesn't sound as cool. And so it's basically, you know, like on my W211, it would be V8 supercharger. That's how they basically title it on the car, because it says compressor. So you're looking for side badging, the rear badging. A lot of the AMG cars are an inch or two lower, but you know, that's kind of hard to tell right off the bat. Obviously wheels, you know, double 5 spokes for some of the body styles. So this car has the monoblocks and things like that, so you can tell by wheels. Looking at brakes, you know, generally Mercedes uses the Brembo brakes, you know, 6 or 8 piston. So of course seats, usually your AMG cars are going to have more options. On a typical basis, it's going to be more of a well-loaded car. It doesn't mean it has to be, but typically that's what you get. I think I have Xenons on this one and my W211. It's got the latest command unit, you know, the larger one of the era, and things like that, which is, you know, not necessarily desirable, but it's just things to know. They both have the rear window shade, the power window shade, which is nice to have. This car runs phenomenal. This thing's got almost 200,000 miles, and there's plenty of get up and go. The last tell, I would say, obviously, you know, it seems like hardly anybody on Facebook ever wants to show pictures of an engine. Like, oh, it's an AMG. Like, I want to see the motor. But anyways, put your foot down when you drive it. And if it don't feel like really quick, then it's probably not an AMG, you know. And don't let the sellers BS you into thinking that it is one. You know, just do your research, and you should be good. I see less fake AMG style things. Usually people call them AMG Sport Package or something like that, versus like on M cars. I see fake M3s, you know, it's a 318 and they're like, it's an M3. Like, and I hope that helps. So for buying your vehicle based on the drivetrain, you know, I picked this era of cars because they have the 722.6, I believe, transmission. It's a 5-speed automatic that is slow but tough. They use the same transmission all the way up to the like S65, which is good for like over 700 foot-pounds of torque. So for all these other cars, they do quite well. Usually you're not going to have a lot of issues. This car's got 200,000 miles, original transmission, and you know, just like any car, as long as you warm it up before you drive it, make sure that, you know, everything's good. Don't just you do a cold start and then go start thrashing on it. You're going to run into problems quite a bit sooner. But you know, that between that and the engines are very reliable in these cars. There's several examples with several 100,000 miles, and as long as they're taken care of and not thrashed too hard, and I think you'll be fine. Oil leaks, I mean, for the most part, I'm not worried about even a light rear main seal. You know, I'm not looking for a completely dry car. Like I say, you got to realize I'm not trying to get usually north of $10,000 when I buy these cars. I paid $2,800 for this W210. And you know, it had a hot start issue, so that you would have to run the starter twice every time. It turned out to be the fuel pump, because there's a check valve inside the fuel pump that maintains the pressure. So I was thinking it had leaking injectors or something like that, and it turned out to be a fuel pump. Bought another fuel pump. That one also was no good. Bought a second one, and then the fuel pump fixed the issue, and it runs like a top. You got to keep in mind that as a Mercedes, these have like this V8 has 16 spark plugs. The V6 has 12. Because that's just how they did it. So it's, you know, you're looking at a couple $100 to replace spark plugs. So I've been real happy with this car, and it's been fairly reliable. You know, like I say, fairly reliable. I've had a lot of like $150 parts. Batteries on Mercedes, oh my, those are, you just might as well have that money the minute you buy the car, because this car's battery is underneath the back seat, and it was about $200. The same for the W211, and then it also has another battery underneath the engine hood that's about $100, $110. That's the auxiliary battery, because it has the SBC electric brakes. And so there's several battery problems that you're going to find with these cars over the years. And so there's a lot of people that say buy OEM. I personally, I don't, because battery tech is battery tech to me. As long as it's a quality battery and the voltage doesn't drop too low, then I think it's fine. That's just my personal, how I've done it, and I've had pretty good luck with that. Alternators, I've had pre-filled alternators. Yeah, all 3 cars have had a new alternator put in, so that's definitely something to consider. That's like a Mercedes thing. Like I say, the electrical systems on these are they have problems. And I honestly would rather deal with electrical problems than mechanical failures, like catastrophic mechanical failures any day of the week, because at least electrical, you can do research and you can hook a multimeter up to it. You can't really quickly repair a connecting rod that went through the side of a block. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. In part 3, I would like to go into more detail on how to use the scan tools, and probably do, I think I'll do some more videos too for individual walkthroughs about things to look for on each of these different models that I currently own, and go through that. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.